Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. I'm John. This is a 1960 John Deere 1010. If this is your first video on this machine, you're really going to want to watch the previous videos. I've made a playlist of it. One of the hardest will it starts that you've probably ever seen, and in the last video I did a budget engine rebuild and put it back in and got the thing to run, but still smoking quite a bit. She gets her name in this video, and it's a well-earned name. I think you'll agree when we get to that part. I've got a lot to do. Let's get into it. We're backing up just a little bit. The engine is not in yet. There's a few things we had to do before installing the engine that I skipped over in the last video, and here they are. That is the front of the reverser, and that is the seal that we're going to change. Gonna be stubborn. Gonna make me drill the other side too. Yes, you are. It was just steady breaking the bit, but it still drilled it. That's pretty funny. Should work. One hit. Now I'll tell you what I find interesting about that. Typically, you put the seal like that. You put the cutout section towards the oil. But this one was not that way. But yeah, I mean, the oil is in there, it's not out here. So I'm putting this like this. I think that's gonna do her. Alright, the old air filter went right there, and I'm never going to have an easier time putting a new air filter on it than this. When the engine's here, this was not so easy to get to. This is where air goes in. This air gets sucked over here and then goes into the intake on the side of the engine. So I don't want to be starting this thing and dusting my newly honed cylinders. So I am going to put a new air filter setup on here. This is a two-stage air filter. There's two filters in here. This thing can point either way. That's the intake. This is the output. Yeah, that was right there. Okay. Now it's time to put the engine back in. I covered this in the last video, so we're going to do a quick breeze through here. Let's see if we can twist that in there. Here. If only it was really that easy. And here's the wire for the glow plugs going back in. Ah, the glow plugs. We'll be seeing more of those in the future. So the new air filter is further this way than the old one was, so the pipe wasn't long enough. And yeah, I could go to the auto parts store, but you know, don't want to wait. So I cut the pipe in half and then welded in a one with the same ID but a different OD, so it wouldn't work with these rubber hoses. So I just cut it in half and put the new pipe in the middle, and now it's long enough. This is where the thermostat housing mounts. It's kind of unusual on this machine because it mounts to the valve cover, and of course coolant goes through that. So coolant actually circulates through the valve cover on this. Yep, that's where the thermostat's supposed to be. Those gaskets I'm putting on there are really high quality too. You know how I know? It says so right on them. High quality. Alright, let's have a look at this generator. Now, I have stuck this on the bench. I spun that with a drill, and I got no voltage here. So what I'm hoping is that I will open it up and find that there's a broken wire or something reasonably easy to fix. I also want to check the bearings because I don't absolutely need this thing to act as a generator, but it definitely has to be there because this is the belt tensioner to run the fan and the water pump. It sounds like it could use a little help in there. So, now when I was looking at this before, I thought those were brush caps because they're the size of brush caps, but you know, looking at the diagrams, those are definitely not brush caps. They actually are screws that hold the inner field windings in. And then behind here are the brushes. Let's start ripping and tearing and see what we can figure out. Guess I'll see if I can get this pulley off. Let me see if I can shock this thing off of here. Yeah, I think it's moving. Now, using a brass hammer keeps from mushrooming those threads out. Instead of mushrooming that, it mushrooms your hammer, which is what you want. Still won't come off of there. Oh, I got the wiggle. Key's in there pretty tight. Wow. I'll come back to that key later. Looks nice, doesn't it? Why on earth wouldn't it be working? Look at that. Good news is that bearing doesn't feel bad. This one back here is a bronze bushing. It just needs cleaned up, and probably a little grease wouldn't hurt it. And then it's got a little port there for adding oil to it while it's in use. Surprised there's not one of those on the front here too, but there's not. Oh, it's right there. It's right there. That's where it is. Main reason for being in here is to try to get these bearings dealt with. And this one, it spins okay, but it is kind of growly. So I'm going to take some time and try to get this key out of here. Maybe some heat will help. Penetrating oil quench. I tried using a pair of side cutters with it mounted in a vise. No go. I gradually escalated my efforts, and before long I was going full caveman on it. So that just will not come off of there. I tried punching down on one side just to get it to move. I heated it, I quenched it, I used penetrating oil. Basically if you want to get that key off of there, you got to put this in a lathe machine, or you could just file that off, but then you're going to need to cut a new keyway and put a new key in it. It's not worth all that to me. I put some oil down this little oiler. It spins much better, so I'm fine with that. This thing essentially is a belt tensioner anyway. Well, I'll do some electrical testing on it and see if there's any chance of it being usable, but I doubt it. So first I need to make sure that none of the commutators are shorted to the case, and the first one I checked... Oh wait, that was my finger. None of them are shorted to the case. So now I'm checking the segments to each other, and they should be quite continuous. And so far they are. So let me go all the way around and I'll make sure that those are reasonable. Alright, well in that respect the commutator checks out. Alright, so how about the field windings? So checking this to the case. No shorts to the case found in the field windings. So now I'm checking the resistance of the winding itself. 8 ohms. That seems pretty high. But I can't even find an ID tag on this thing to look up the specs. There is nothing on it. I think, yeah, it used to be right there. The label is gone. So here's what I'm thinking. These brushes, can you see the brushes? Those brushes have seen better days. And they're barely getting pushed onto the commutator anymore. But I think I ought to be able to make them contact long enough to test this thing. I want to see if this is even a 12 volt generator. I'm not sure, and there's no sense in fooling with it if it's just going to make 6 volts. Let me see if I can chuck this armature on the lathe and I can clean up this commutator. Alright, I've got it chucked in the lathe using the soft jaws, and I've got a dial indicator here, and I have it running pretty true. It's within about 2 thousandths. I can't go all the way around because of that key. So I'm going to try to coax a center into it right there. Not bad. I think that's going to be fine. Certainly good enough for testing. So it looks good, but there are places like right there where copper kind of got jammed in between the segments. And that just makes an electrical short. You don't want that. So you got to use something thin enough to go in there and clean all that junk out. So I'm going to go all the way around and clean all those out. brushes are making contact. So in theory, should work. Put a little grease in this bushing. That guy goes there. Like that. Alright, how about a little bench test? See if we get any voltage out of this thing. Not much. So this wasn't really a valid test. In order for this to work, it has to be hooked to a battery, and to use it on the machine, you have to use a voltage regulator. I'm not at all confident that the voltage regulator on the machine is going to work, and the wiring on this thing is just a total mess, so, well, you'll see. I have to think that the field windings are probably the problem. It's just not worth, it's not worth all the trouble fooling with this old thing. At least not at this point. This isn't something I need to do right now. I could always do it again in the future. But the reality is, all the battery does on this machine is the glow plugs and the starter. I don't need the battery for anything else, and a jump pack will do that. It's just to fix this and then even have a battery to maintain on the machine. I'd rather just use my jump pack. So yeah, this just became a glorified belt tensioner. Much better. I think it'll do its job as a belt tensioner. And maybe some of you guys out there know more about these than I do, but tell me what you think. I think it's the field windings. I think that 8 ohms is too high, but what do I know? I know I jacked up that Woodruff key. So the generator was kind of a bust. I expected that. You don't cut the wires on the generator if it works. There had to be something broken with it. The starter still works. This thing just smokes like crazy, and it's in such an inaccessible position when it's mounted on the machine that you just can't tell where the smoke is coming from. So I want to open this thing up and clean it out and not screw anything up. That's the goal. So the battery cable hooks here. Control wire hooks there. When you put power to this, it activates the solenoid, which makes a connection between these two and sends the battery voltage to the motor and turns the engine. Maybe not. There we go. Wow. So this solenoid is doing double duty. It's also sending the Bendix out. It's kind of cool. Not too bad. The brushes all look pretty good. There's 4 brushes on this. And the commutator looks pretty good too. I see lots of looks like copper bits. I'm not sure what to make of that. But I'm thinking just a good clean out is going to be what this thing needs most. Yeah. And no surprise, things look pretty good because this thing still works. The main thing I'm going to do is clean it up, put a little grease in the bushing, a little grease on the Bendix gears up here, and the brush area looks a little ugly. We'll get that cleaned up. These brush wires have a bunch of loose strands hanging off of them. And if those are shorting, like a little strand shorting against the case, that's going to make it smoke. What I'm seeing here is this wire that's running between the brush and on this side the case. Looks like that side's also the case. And these other brushes are going to the windings. Those look okay. Well, if it's running to the case, it's shorting to the case isn't a problem. So maybe I don't worry about it. They just don't look very good. I think they're just spring-loaded in there. Yeah. The leaf spring. I like this old stuff. Designed to be fixable and reusable. See if all of our connections are tight. It wasn't very tight. Yeah, that also wasn't very tight. So I wonder if that wasn't it. Maybe getting some arcing in the connections. All right, I'm going to get all this stuff cleaned up and we'll bring you back. I mean, that just was not tight at all. This is the main incoming power from the solenoid into the starter motor. Electrical joint compound, deox, anti-seize, all that kind of stuff. Apparently there's a bunch of people out there that think that this will prevent electricity from flowing on the connection. Now I don't want to strip it out, obviously, but that's a lot tighter than it was. Okay, all the connections are now tight, and I got rid of all that other junk that was in there. So I think we should be doing a little better as far as hopefully not smoking. I'm going to take a little piece of Scotch-Brite on the commutator, just because I'm here. That brush is not sitting, actually a couple of them aren't sitting how I would like them to. I think loosening, letting them find their position against the commutator, and then retightening would probably be a good thing. I've already greased the bushing there, put a little bit more on the shaft. Always good to grease the shaft. Alright, we should be ready to start again. So let's do a sketchy bench test. Probably fry these leads in half a second. I just wanted to make sure this thing's going to do something before I mount it to the machine. Woo! Yeah, I'd say that's going to do it. We can actually look at putting this that way. Hey, there it went. Maybe this will work. I can only get one finger in there. There we go. Grief. Starter is on and hooked up. Still can't start it though. No cooling system, no oil. Let's put some oil in it. How much would it stink to get all the way to the end and start it up and forget about the engine oil? Woo! Fuel lines over to the injectors. And I did blow out the fuel lines right before I did that, just in case. All right, we are definitely getting close, but there's something that I really want to do before I get this all back together and try to start it. And that is, see if I can fix this little primer pump. There is a pump right here that is supposed to take some fuel and pump it directly into the intake to aid with starting. It feels like it does absolutely nothing. So I think whatever seals or anything that were in there are long since gone. We got dead seals, that's the problem. I think. And I think that's really going to help me. The main reason is, if I know me, and I think I do, I will want to use starting fluid on this thing if it doesn't fire up. And I don't want to use starting fluid on it if I can avoid it. I'm not of the don't ever use starting fluid on a diesel, that it's going to lock up the engine. I think that's ridiculous. You can use starting fluid on them. But I do think it is possible that you can cause detonations and things that are going to be hard on your pistons, maybe crack the lands, that kind of stuff. So we've got glow plugs that now function, and obviously a pump that works. And then if I can just get this primer pump to also work, I think this thing will start and never need starting fluid. So let me quit babbling. Let me rip that thing out of there and see what we can figure out. All right, there it is. Let's bring it into the workbench and see if I can do anything with it. Yeah, little check valve. Can't get any simpler than that, just a spring and a ball. So this one's going to be the same. This plunger here, can I get this out of here without destroying something? See if anything seems clogged here. Does not seem to be. I think I'm going to put these back in. Whew. I'd have been looking for that spring for the next 20 minutes. So yeah, you need a piston with a seal and then 2 check valves. Well, the check valves look fine. So I've got to get to the seal that's in that cylinder there. Now I don't know if it unscrews here, right there, or if it unscrews there. I suspect it's there. But, I mean, I don't have anything to lose here. Let's throw it in a vise and we'll turn that and see which one breaks loose. That was easy. Yeah, that's what I was expecting to find. Some rotted out. There's your problem, lady. Hopefully I have something that can serve. That might be a winner. I'll tell you, those look pretty darn close. Think that's gonna work. Yeah, that is much, much better. Okay. Now we have a primer pump. Now I can open this valve and let the fuel from the tank fill up these filters. To get ahead of ourselves, we need a cooling system before we start this thing. Getting excited though. Thing is, you guys have already seen it start at this point, right? Might as well put my belt tensioner on, I mean my generator. That hose is good for another 60 years. Might help if I put the last hose on. Yeah, I forgot to order another radiator hose for that. Can you believe that thing's leaking? All right, I am not ready to try driving this thing around just yet. We're just gonna start it, hopefully, and run it. First, I need to bleed it. So this is the first crank. I've got all the injectors cracked. It's gonna take a while for fuel to get here because pretty much everything is empty. I did confirm that there's fuel getting to the pump, but it's gonna have to pump it all the way over here. And once I get fuel, then I'll look at doing the glow plugs, the primer pump, and see if we can't get this thing running. Let's crank her up. So this starter tends to start out fast, and then you'll hear it slows down partway through cranking. I have not been able to figure out why it's doing that. Anybody know? Take a while to fill those lines up. Oh yeah, I got fuel on 3 of them. How about that? So we have fuel. Glow plugs are definitely drawing current. And give it a couple of primes too. Ooh. I can feel it squirt. All right, she's glow plugged. I say she fires right up. Smoke. Woo, she was trying. Get a couple more primer pumps. So close. I'm glow plugging it a little bit more. Let's give it a little more fuel. My jump pack is dying. You believe that? Come on, man. Give me some juice. It's spinning too slow. You gotta be kidding me. That thing would start if it would spin fast. Tell you what, a whiff of starting fluid and it would go, but I'm not doing it. This thing shouldn't need starting fluid. I must say I'm a little confused here. This jump pack can provide plenty of current to start my truck. It shouldn't have any problem here. It says it's half full. Maybe that means it's really dead. They take a long time to charge. All right, well, the middle two are working the best, and I don't think number one is working at all. So I need to check the voltage on that wire. It looks like number 4 isn't doing all that much either. I really think if that starter wasn't so tired, this thing would pop off. I hate to do it, but I think I'm going to have to hit it with starting fluid. But this will probably be the only time. This thing is so close to starting. And, now let's try the primer pump. Let's see what we get. A slow starter. I've got a full battery here and a jump pack. I really ought to be able to start this thing. What do I do? Hit it with starting fluid? All right, we ain't playing. We're gonna do 24 volts on the starter again. Hopefully that'll do the trick. Let's see what we get. Yeah, I think my starter is kaput. Look at it smoking. Didn't look that bad inside, but wow. Wow. All right. Hint taken. Well, this is surprising. My glow plugs are not doing anything. They were. I know at least these two were working. So I just hooked up the wire and I checked the voltage at each lead. And the voltage is there, but they're not drawing anything. So, I don't know. I never put more than 12 volts to them. There's no reason that they shouldn't be working. All 4 of them? That's really bizarre. I don't know what to make of that. But I think the starter actually turns out to be more a weak battery than the weak starter. So I've got 2 batteries in parallel now at 12 volts. I put a meter on it and I checked while I was cranking. It was dropping down to 9.5 volts. So now while it's cranking, it sounds much happier and it's at 10.8 volts. I also discovered in the service manual that the starter I have, this model right here, draws the most amperage of any that are available for this machine. So it'll draw 200 amps free running, meaning under no load. So I don't know how many amps it's drawing when I'm trying to start it, but it's a lot. Running without glow plugs again. Good grief. All right, after all this work, I'm losing patience. I would have to wait like 4 days for a new set of glow plugs to arrive. Remember, I still haven't heard this thing run since the rebuild. I'm using starting fluid. Boy, that was close. Remember how that was smoking like crazy before? Sounds good. So this is where we were in the last video. It continued to smoke more than I would have liked, and I ran it for probably 45 minutes at mid to high idle speed. I wasn't able to do a proper break-in yet because I need some hydraulic hoses and other things fixed before I can drive it around. Alright, these darn glow plugs, man, these things are giving me fits. So this is my glow plug wire. This is hooked to all 4 plugs. I have confirmed that it's intact and it sends voltage to the terminal of each plug, but no current flows. So I've got this set on ohms here, and we are going to check to ground, and we're getting 95 ohms. Now each plug is supposed to be around, I think, 2 to 4 ohms. And since there's 4 of them, I should be getting like 1/2 to 1 ohm here, because the current has 4 paths to get back to ground. So 95 is way off. That basically is an open circuit on all the plugs. Now these were brand new glow plugs, and I'm thinking they may be designed for 6-volt system, because I never put 24 volts to them. I put 12 volts to them, and it seems that they're all fried. So we're gonna pull these glow plugs out of here. That's just what I wanted to do. All of them look like they got hot at one point. Let's do some testing on these things. Like I said, we should be getting like 2 ohms, maybe 4 ohms. And here we've got an open circuit. Well, it's trying to give me some mega ohms. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm getting like 6 mega ohms, the best I can get. That is not going to act as a heater. That's the one I was probably reading when I was doing the glow plug wire. It's at 94 ohms. 4 mega ohms. 3 mega ohms. So yeah, those things are all cooked. It is possible that even though this is a 12-volt battery system, that there was something cutting the voltage to the glow plugs. And I can't tell in the wiring diagrams, but I'm seeing online a couple people saying that it's supposed to only get 9 volts to the glow plugs, and maybe that's what burnt them up. Seems kind of too sensitive to be burned up by something that's just 3 volts over voltage. But anyway, I'm going to continue to work on that. In the meantime, this radiator hose. This hose is obsolete, no longer produced. I went to 3 local auto parts stores. Nobody has it, and also nobody has in stock the tape that's supposedly used for fixing these. And I'm not above trying that, but I did find that, which is pretty darn close. It's not It's not the same, so I'm hoping I can cut that out of there and that will work and be a new hose. Maybe. Is that gonna work? Pretty close. Let's see if that'll go on there. So the new hose is slightly smaller than the old one. So after a little bit of effort and grunting, some WD-40, and only a little profanity, we actually got it on. Well, it's definitely not made for it, but it's on there. I actually think that might work. Check that out. Finally got the darn hose. And I got some protection for it where it rubbed through last time. Hopefully it won't do that again. This hose comes off of the left side of the hydraulic pump and then goes back to the back of the machine where it was leaking. I'm going to attach it in the front, fish it to the back, and then hook it up back there. Much better to hook it up here than to crawl underneath this oily mess. All right, so now I need to snake this back through. Right here, it's now snaking back. So that hose is not leaking anymore, but I'm still leaking oil, and a lot of it. Pandora's box. So this is actually a battery cable. It's got oil dripping off of it. And that is coming from right there. Behind that, I see this. So this is just hydraulic lines to the lift cylinder. So we might be leaking here, and it looks more likely we're leaking there. Yeah, in fact, I can see a drip right there. Maybe it's loose. Please just be loose. That one didn't feel loose. Yeah, that one's hard fitting. I do hate an oil leak. Not sure if that's a swivel or if that's a swivel. It's probably the leak. I'm going to tighten the rest of them too, and we'll check back. What can you do? You cannot work on something like this. I'm just going to name this thing Pandora. I think that's the most appropriate name. I was trying to tighten it a little more because I thought it was still loose, and it broke. And of course now it's endlessly dripping oil out of the cylinder. So we'll let that sit there and drain out and then figure out where we're going from here. All right, I've been looking at this thing, and this is a fixed connection. This was not a swivel here. Yeah, maybe it was supposed to be a swivel, and it was, but now it's not. But that is just a pipe thread, as is that. And that means I can use thread sealant on it. I don't need it to seal against this tapered face. So what I'm getting at is I think I can just weld this thing up and have it work. Obviously, I could go buy a new one of these. The closest place to me is 35 minutes away, and I don't think they just have like JIC stuff. They don't have the O-ring boss kind of things. I doubt they would have this fitting. So the nearest place that's going to have it is an hour away. So you're talking about 2 hours of my time just driving. I think I can probably fix this. So that's what I'm going to try. And yes, I already took the O-ring off of that. It was there. But obviously this is going to get hot, so. Well, there it is after welding. Not super pretty, but I don't think it's going to leak. As long as there's no pinholes in that, that should work. So I'm going to use thread sealant and put this back together. So I suspect I found the problem. Forgot to hit record, by the way. I just screwed that in. No big deal. This is a swivel, and it feels pretty sloppy, so I think the O-ring in there is shot. This is not the kind of swivel that you typically see where once you screw the hoses together and you get the faces of the taper mated well together, then the swivel gets tightened up and it no longer comes into play. No matter how tight you get this taper here, that is always going to be able to do that. And I think that's where my leak was. And I don't think there's much you can do about that other than just replacing that hose. Yeah, that's how I broke it off. Is I noticed that I could wiggle that. So I thought, oh, it just needs to be tighter. Typically that's the case, but not on this one. That's as tight as those threads are getting, and that's always going to wiggle. All right, I'm heading to the auto parts store tomorrow morning to pick up a seal, and this thing's going to leak. So I'm going to go and try to get a new hose for this. All right, Dora. It looks like that's going to come loose. So I had some heartburn about putting a new hose here because I'm trying not to throw a bunch of money into this machine. You know the deal. But it's going to need new hydraulic oil, so I didn't want to put new oil in it and have it all leak out. That would be stupid too. Click. So I held my nose and I went to Napa and I got a new hose, which is right here, a nice 4,000 PSI hose. Guess how much this hose costs? You know, it's about 18 inches long. Well, I was fully expecting it to cost like 80 bucks. And it turns out it cost 30 bucks. 30 bucks! I mean, it's a short hose, so the rubber hose part costs very little. So it's all about the fittings that are crimped on the end. And both of these are just fixed. They don't have swivels. It's just 1/2-inch pipe thread. So they're cheap. It's like the cheapest ones they have. Take the same hose and put British pipe on it. It's going to cost 3 times as much, probably more. See, that's the end that had the swivel, and it just doesn't need a swivel because this end has a swivel. Not this end of the hose, but the thing that it's screwing into. And this is the type of swivel that when you get it tight enough, it won't swivel anymore and the hoses are tight together. They won't wobble. See, that's not gonna leak. See, I think that was money well spent. I'm about to put way more than $30 worth of hydraulic oil in this thing. I forget what the tank is. It's like 5 gallons, so it's probably gonna be a $70 or $80 for that. And to then have to deal with this and leaking and everything. Yeah. So I want to do a proper break-in. That means I need to be able to operate it. And there's a lot of conflicting information out there about that, but I'm going from the service manual. It says actually for the first 20 hours, you don't want to run it at full load and you don't want to idle it for extended periods without load. And that includes running it at high RPM without load. It wants you to do like half load and mix things up a lot. For 20 hours, that's a lot. I don't expect it to take that long for it to quit smoking. But I do need to operate this thing for quite a while. And I have another leak. This is coming from, and it looked at first like the oil pan, but it's not. It's coming from here, but it's dripping down underneath that, coming from the hydraulic pump. There's a gasket in here, but I don't think that's the problem. There's a seal. Of course it's a seal. There's a seal in there, the shaft that comes in and drives the pump. So I'm gonna have to deal with that. This is still the old hydraulic oil that's in there. I'm glad I kept that stuff because it has helped me find lots of leaks and hasn't cost me anything. So obviously I have more work to do to be able to drive this thing around, and not just a little bit of work. There's a whole lot more to do, and we're gonna get into that next week. Man, this old pig is teaching me some lessons. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one.